Welcome to Laboratory of Dreams.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dream Laboratory. Are you snuggled up in your coziest blanket with a cup of cocoa with marshmallows? Well, you should be, because I have a Halloween tale that's going to make your spine tingle and your eyes widen. Ah, Halloween, that magical time of the year when the air turns crisp, leaves turn golden, and the aroma of apple pies and cinnamon fills the air. And let's not forget the pumpkins, their orange glow lighting up the nights as if they hold secrets. Today, let's delve into a story full of enchantment, friendship, and of course, some Halloween mischief. Meet Noah, Emma, and Tim, three inseparable friends who share a great love for Halloween. Our story begins when these three friends decide to pick out their pumpkins for carving from a less-known, mysterious place called McCracken's Pumpkin Patch. But as they soon find out, not all pumpkins are the same. So sit back, take a sip of your cocoa, and let's embark on an extraordinary Halloween adventure. Once upon a time, on a cool autumn afternoon, the sky painted in shades of twilight, Noah, Emma, and Tim set out on their bicycles toward a special destination. They were going to McCracken's Pumpkin Patch. Not many people knew about this isolated pumpkin patch, tucked away at the outskirts of their little town. It was like a hidden gem, a place filled with autumnal enchantment, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets to anyone willing to listen. The trio pedaled energetically through winding lanes, leaves crunching beneath their bike tires. Emma had a sketchbook tucked under her arm, already brimming with ideas for her pumpkin carving. Noah had a camera hanging around his neck, eager to capture the magic of the evening. Tim, the most adventurous of them all, was just excited about the thrill of the unknown. When they finally arrived, they were greeted by a peculiar sight. McCracken's pumpkin patch looked like it was straight out of a fairy tale. Row upon row of pumpkins, each one unique in shape and size. But what caught their attention the most was old Mrs. McCracken, the keeper of the pumpkin patch, with her wiry silver hair and a long flowing cloak that swayed in the wind. "Ah, visitors! How delightful!" she crooned, her voice as wispy as the fog that had begun to settle around the patch. "Choose your pumpkins wisely, children, for not all pumpkins are the same." Mrs. McCracken's words hung in the air as the trio began their hunt. Noah was captivated by a pumpkin that was perfectly round, its skin an even, bright orange. Emma was drawn to one that was slightly misshapen, its unique curvature giving it character. Tim, however, was pulled toward the farthest end of the patch, to a pumpkin unlike any other. It sat alone, almost hidden amongst the tall grass, glowing faintly as if calling out to him. The pumpkin was neither too big nor too small and had a mystic aura, something indescribable. Tim felt a strange yet powerful connection, so without giving it another thought, he chose it. As the three friends placed their chosen pumpkins onto their bike baskets, they exchanged excited glances. They were ready to take on the age-old tradition of pumpkin carving. Little did they know, their Halloween was about to take an extraordinary twist, all because of Tim's peculiar choice. The atmosphere was thick with excitement as Noah, Emma, and Tim wheeled their bicycles into Emma's spacious garage. The walls were lined with old paintings, gardening tools, and forgotten toys. It was the ideal space for their creative endeavor. Sheets of newspaper were laid out on a long wooden table, a variety of carving tools and markers neatly arranged at its center. Noah set up his camera to capture the moment, the lens focusing and refocusing on the three pumpkins that now occupied the center stage. Emma flipped open her sketchbook, revealing intricately drawn pumpkin faces that danced across the pages. As for Tim, he couldn't keep his eyes off his own unique pumpkin. It had a mysterious pull that had grown stronger since they left McCracken's pumpkin patch. "All right, guys, may the best pumpkin win," Emma declared, lifting her carving knife with flair. Noah chuckled and aimed his camera at her, capturing the dramatic moment. Tim grinned and picked up his own knife, feeling a mixture of eagerness and apprehension. As Noah and Emma made the first incisions into their pumpkins, creating intricate eyes and whimsically curved mouths, Tim was having a harder time. His knife seemed to resist as he tried to pierce the pumpkin's skin. "I think my pumpkin doesn't want to be carved," Tim joked, pressing harder. Finally, with a sudden jolt, the knife sank in. But it slipped, just a little, causing Tim to accidentally nick his finger. "Ouch!" he exclaimed, withdrawing his hand quickly. A single drop of blood fell from his fingertip, landing directly onto the pumpkin. What happened next was beyond belief. The pumpkin seemed to absorb the drop of blood instantaneously. Its skin shimmered for a moment, as if reacting to the contact, and then, the carving Tim had just started to make, the outline of an eye, deepened on its own, forming into a more distinct, ominous shape. The room grew silent. Emma and Noah looked up, their eyes widening at the sight of Tim's pumpkin, which now sported a malevolent grin that none of them had carved. Guys, did you see that?" Tim stammered, stepping back from the table. The pumpkin's grin seemed to widen even more, if that was even possible. Noah lowered his camera slowly, his face pale. "Yeah, we saw it, Tim. The question is, what do we do now?" Emma closed her sketchbook with a snap. "I don't know about you two, but I think we need to have a little chat with Mrs. McCracken." As they stood there, staring at the grinning pumpkin, the trio couldn't shake off the feeling that their Halloween adventure had just taken a turn for the extraordinary, and possibly the terrifying. Within minutes, the trio found themselves back at McCracken's pumpkin patch. It looked different now, as if the moonlight had imbued it with an otherworldly glow. With each step, the autumn leaves crunched under their feet like whispers, warning them of the path ahead. Mrs. McCracken's cottage was right next to the patch. It looked cozy but ancient, as if it had been a part of the landscape for centuries. Noah knocked on the door, his camera hanging loosely around his neck, no longer capturing moments of excitement, but rather documenting an unfolding mystery. The door creaked open, and Mrs. McCracken's eyes peeked through. "Oh, it's you three. Come in," she said, her voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. They entered the cottage and found themselves surrounded by the comforting scent of lavender and old books. The interior seemed larger than they had expected, with walls adorned by vintage photos and mysterious trinkets. A large, circular table dominated the room, its surface covered with ancient tomes and a crystal ball that appeared to be clouded with swirling mist. "Mrs. McCracken, something strange happened," Emma began, her voice trembling as she recounted their experience. Tim placed the still grinning pumpkin on the table. The old woman studied it for a moment before sighing deeply. "Ah, you chose one of the enchanted ones, and you've activated its magic, no less." "Enchanted?" Noah asked, pulling out his phone and switching it to record. "Like, it has a curse?" "Aye," she nodded. "You must break it before midnight. Otherwise, all carved pumpkins in the town will come to life, turning malevolent." "Why?" Tim's voice was barely above a whisper, guilt etched onto his face. Mrs. McCracken sat down, gesturing for them to do the same. "Because, young man, not all magic is kind, and not all pumpkins are just pumpkins. Some are vessels for trapped spirits, mischievous and vengeful. You've set one free, and now you have to make it right." The room fell silent, each absorbing the weight of their newfound responsibility. Emma broke the silence. "How do we break the curse?" Mrs. McCracken leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as if gauging their resolve. "It's not going to be easy, and I can only guide you so far. You'll need 3 specific ingredients: moonlit dew, a raven's feather, and the heart of another enchanted pumpkin." they looked at each other, a mix of fear and determination on their faces. They knew what they had to do. Noah paused his phone recording and set it aside. "All right," said Tim, clenching his fists. "Let's break this curse." As they prepared to leave, Mrs. McCracken's eyes settled on the enchanted pumpkin, still grinning maliciously. "Remember, the clock is ticking," she warned, sending a shiver down their spines. Unbeknownst to them, as they stepped out into the chilling night, other carved pumpkins around the town began to stir, their once friendly smiles twisting into expressions of mischief and malevolence. Under a moon that appeared too large and too orange for comfort, Noah, Emma, and Tim exited Mrs. McCracken's cottage, armed with newfound purpose. Each friend had an individual quest, a piece of the puzzle that would restore normality to their lives and their neighborhood. "Okay, here's the plan," said Emma, pulling a notepad and pen from her backpack. "I've made a list of the ingredients we need for the ritual: moonlit dew, a raven's feather, and the heart of an enchanted pumpkin." Noah glanced at his wristwatch. It read 9:45 p.m. "Guys, we have a little over 2 hours. Let's split up. I'll go to the meadow for the moonlit dew." "I'll take the raven's feather," said Emma. "I think I saw a raven's nest near the old windmill last week. That leaves me with the heart of an enchanted pumpkin," Tim said, his eyes filled with steely resolve. One by one, they set off on their quests. Noah reached the meadow where moonlight pooled like silvery puddles. Carefully, he filled a glass vial with dew, ensuring only to collect it where the moonlight touched. Meanwhile, Emma found her way to the old windmill. With the wind howling through its rotting timbers, it was a place that looked haunted. Armed with her unwavering spirit, she skillfully climbed the windmill's rusty ladder and plucked a single feather from a raven's nest, all while trying to avoid the stern glare of the bird perched nearby. As for Tim, he returned to McCracken's pumpkin patch. But this time, it was different. The pumpkins seemed to be watching him. Heart pounding, he picked another enchanted pumpkin, but not without a struggle. It was as if the pumpkin resisted him, knowing its fate. Finally, after much effort, Tim managed to extract the heart, a small, concentrated seed that seemed to pulse with energy. With all 3 ingredients secured, they rendezvoused back at Mrs. McCracken's cottage. The clock struck 11:30 p.m. "We did it," Emma panted, laying the raven feather next to Noah's vial of moonlit dew and Tim's seed on the table. Mrs. McCracken looked at the items and then at them, her eyes softened with something akin to pride. "Well done, you 3. You've gathered the ingredients, but remember, you've not broken the curse yet." As they gathered around the table for the final part of their mission, the air grew thick with tension and mystical energy. They couldn't help but think of all the other pumpkins that had come to life, causing havoc around the town. Their adventure had become bigger than them, bigger than Halloween itself, and it rested on their young shoulders to set things right. The old grandfather clock in Mrs. McCracken's living room chimed, signaling that it was 11:45 p.m. The trio of friends stood in a circle around a cauldron, each clutching one of the 3 special ingredients they had risked so much to gather. The air inside the cottage had become electric, each tick of the clock amplifying their sense of urgency. Mrs. McCracken, who had changed into an intricate shawl embroidered with mysterious runes, guided them through the ritual. Place the moonlit dew, the raven's feather, and the heart of the enchanted pumpkin into the cauldron. Noah tipped the vial and let the moonlit dew trickle into the cauldron. Emma delicately placed the raven's feather beside it. Lastly, Tim, with a trembling hand, dropped in the pulsating seed, the heart of an enchanted pumpkin. "Repeat after me." Mrs. McCracken's voice was almost a whisper. "Spirits of air, earth, and sea, set the ensnared pumpkins free." "Spirits of air, earth, and sea, set the ensnared pumpkins free," the friends chanted in unison. The cauldron erupted in blue flames, the magical energy swirling around them, lifting their hair and rustling their clothes. And then the unexpected happened. Mrs. McCracken lifted her arms, revealing her shawl to be more like wings of a gigantic butterfly. "Thank you, dear children, for completing the ritual. You see, I cast the enchantment on the pumpkins as a lesson, to show the importance of respecting all living beings." "You're a witch?" Noah's voice quivered. "A good one," Mrs. McCracken replied, smiling warmly. It was time someone learned the true spirit of Halloween, respect for the magical and mysterious. Just as the clock struck midnight, they felt a shift in the air, a collective sigh that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath their feet. Texts and notifications began flooding their phones. Their neighbors were reporting that the mischievous pumpkins had returned to their docile, carved states. They had done it. The curse was broken. Exhausted but elated, Noah, Emma, and Tim stepped out of Mrs. McCracken's cottage. The sky was a lighter shade of dark blue, almost as if the world was waking up from a strange dream. "Wow, this has been the most memorable Halloween ever," Tim said, his eyes wide with lingering disbelief. Emma nodded. "And the most magical." "Yeah," Noah agreed. "It's one thing to dress up like heroes, but tonight, we actually were heroes." They smiled at each other, their friendship deepened by an adventure that had been anything but ordinary. The enchantment was lifted, but the experience had shed a layer of magic into their lives that they would carry forever. Dear listeners, you've journeyed with Noah, Emma, and Tim through an unforgettable Halloween adventure, one that shows us that the line between the ordinary and the magical is as thin as a spider's web on a dewy morning. They found courage they didn't know they had, solved riddles that seemed unsolvable, and most importantly, they broke the pumpkin curse. Happy Halloween. Thank you for being a part of this storytelling journey. Now, close your eyes for just a moment and listen. Can you hear it? The gentle melody that dances on the wind, carried by the whispers of ancient spirits and the rustle of fallen leaves. Let it envelop you. Let it take your imagination to magical places you've never been. And always remember that the true magic of Halloween lives not just in spooky tales, but in the boundless realms of your own imagination.